Why has Tiffany Trump stayed silent while her family dominated headlines? At 31, she is finally speaking out, and it's not what Donald Trump expected. For years, she balanced loyalty and independence, appearing at key moments but never fully stepping into the spotlight. Now, with new tensions surfacing, her relationship with her father is under scrutiny like never before. What kept her on the sidelines while her siblings thrived in the Trump empire? What really happened behind closed doors? And does this signal her final break from the family legacy? Let's dive in. The Trump family has dominated headlines for years, with each member playing a distinct role in shaping its legacy. Donald Trump's eldest children, Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric, have been at the forefront, actively engaging in business, politics, and media. But there's one Trump who has remained noticeably quiet, staying out of the fray. Tiffany Trump. Unlike her siblings, she was never fully embedded in her father's empire, nor did she take center stage in his political campaigns. Now, at 31, Tiffany is breaking her silence, and it's not the kind of revelation her father would have hoped for. Many are wondering why she chose to stay quiet for so long. And more importantly, why is she speaking out now? For years, Tiffany was seen as the forgotten Trump, a distant figure who appeared only at carefully curated family events, standing slightly apart from the inner circle. But behind the scenes, her life was far more complex than most people realize. The only child of Donald Trump's marriage to actress and television personality Marla Maples. At the time, Donald Trump was still building his brand, and his personal life was frequently making headlines. His marriage to Marla had been the subject of intense media scrutiny, particularly because of the very public affair that ended his first marriage to Ivanka Trump. From the moment Tiffany was born, she was already part of a high-profile story. But her childhood was unlike that of her half-siblings. When Donald and Marla finalized their divorce in 1999, Marla made a decision that would shape Tiffany's entire upbringing. She moved to California, far from the towering glass offices of Trump Tower and the social circles of New York's elite. Unlike Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric, who were raised in the heart of Manhattan, Tiffany grew up in the quiet, celebrity-filled enclave of Calabasas. For many, it was surprising that a Trump child would be raised outside of the city that defined her father's empire. But for Marla, this was an intentional move. She wanted Tiffany to have a childhood that was free from the pressures of the Trump brand. Life in California was vastly different from the world her half-siblings knew. While Ivanka and her brothers attended exclusive New York schools and spent their weekends in boardrooms, Tiffany's days were filled with school activities, outdoor sports, and a more relaxed way of life. Marla was determined to raise her daughter with a sense of balance, shielding her from the level of exposure that came with the Trump name. She enrolled Tiffany in Viewpoint School, a prestigious private institution where tuition alone cost tens of thousands of dollars a year. Though this was still an exclusive environment, it was nothing like the high-powered upbringing of her siblings, who were constantly surrounded by their father's influence. Donald Trump was present in Tiffany's life, but not in the way he was with his older children. Their relationship was built around scheduled visits, trips to Trump Tower, summer stays at Mar-a-Lago, and appearances at family functions. He wasn't absent, but he also wasn't involved in the everyday aspects of her life. The distance between them was both physical and emotional. Tiffany wasn't raised in an environment where she was expected to follow in her father's footsteps, and unlike her siblings, she wasn't positioned as a successor to his business empire. Despite this, Tiffany made efforts to stay connected to her father. As she got older, she spent more time in New York, visiting her father's world, but she was always more of an observer than a participant. She didn't have the same close bond with him that Ivanka did, nor was she actively involved in the Trump organization's affairs like Don Jr. and Eric. While the older Trump children built their careers around their father's brand, Tiffany's focus was elsewhere. For years, she remained in the background, making only occasional appearances in the media. But that changed when Donald Trump launched his presidential campaign in 2015. As the race heated up, Tiffany stepped into the spotlight for the first time, giving the public a rare glimpse into her relationship with her father. She made her first major campaign appearance at the Republican National Convention in 2016, delivering a speech that was carefully crafted to introduce her father from a personal perspective. Unlike her siblings, who spoke about business, politics, and policy, Tiffany focused on her father's encouragement, highlighting his role in supporting her education and personal growth. Her speech was well received, but it was noticeably different from the addresses given by Ivanka and Don Jr. While they positioned themselves as extensions of their father's political brand, Tiffany remained somewhat separate, her speech coming across as more personal and less politically charged. Even though she participated in the campaign, she didn't take on a major role, and once the election was over, she largely stepped back from the political scene. At the time, many assumed that Tiffany's limited involvement in her father's campaign was due to her busy academic schedule. She had recently graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, the same school her father and Ivanka had attended, and she was preparing to attend law school at Georgetown. But others speculated that her absence from the political arena hinted at something deeper, a sign that she was intentionally keeping her distance from her father's world. As Donald Trump's presidency unfolded, Tiffany remained mostly in the background. While Ivanka and her husband Jared Kushner took on prominent roles in the White House, Tiffany stayed focused on her studies. Unlike her siblings, she didn't become a key figure in her father's administration. She attended a few official events, but she was never at the center of political discussions or policy decisions. However, by 2020, something had changed. During Trump's re-election campaign, Tiffany's role became more pronounced. She once again took the stage at the Republican National Convention, but this time her speech had a different tone. Unlike her 2016 address, which was largely personal, her 2020 speech was much more politically charged. She spoke about media bias, the importance of free speech, and the dangers of political manipulation. It was a noticeable shift from her previous public appearances, leading many to wonder if she was being pushed into a more active role within the campaign. As the election cycle progressed, Tiffany's involvement grew. She attended more campaign events, made more public statements, and appeared more frequently alongside her father. Some believed that she was trying to strengthen her position within the Trump family, while others speculated that she was simply fulfilling an obligation. Either way, it was clear that Tiffany's role had evolved, and for the first time, she was stepping into a more political spotlight. But then came one of the most shocking moments of the Trump presidency, a controversy that put Tiffany at the center of an unexpected media firestorm. In 2019, Madeleine Westerhout, one of Trump's closest White House assistants, made a remark that stunned political observers. She allegedly told reporters that Donald Trump did not like to be photographed with Tiffany because of her body. The comment was quickly leaked, and the fallout was immediate. Trump responded by publicly denying the claim, insisting that he loved Tiffany. But the damage had already been done. The remark reinforced speculation that Tiffany's relationship with her father was not as close as the one he shared with Ivanka or his sons. It also led many to question whether Tiffany had been sidelined in ways the public hadn't previously considered. That moment marked a turning point in Tiffany's relationship with the media and, perhaps, with her father. For years, she had been able to navigate the public eye without much controversy. But now she was at the center of a conversation that she never intended to be part of. The question remained: how much did this revelation truly reflect the dynamics within the Trump family? And more importantly, how did Tiffany feel about it? For years, Tiffany Trump managed to avoid the intense scrutiny that followed her father and siblings. She was never directly involved in the Trump organization, nor did she play a major role in his political career, at least not in the way Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric did. Her public appearances were carefully selected, and she never seemed eager to take on the responsibilities that came with being a high-profile Trump. But by the time the 2016 presidential election was in full swing, it became harder for her to stay in the background. Donald Trump's campaign was dominating media coverage, and every member of his family was expected to show support. For Tiffany, this meant stepping into a world she had largely been distanced from. While her father's older children had spent years being groomed as public figures, Tiffany had to find her footing quickly. One of her most significant moments came during the Republican National Convention. When she walked onto the stage in front of a packed crowd, many people were seeing her speak publicly for the first time. Her speech was simple, personal, and carefully worded. She spoke about the encouragement she had received from her father, emphasizing the ways he had supported her growth and education. It was a stark contrast to the speeches given by her siblings, who focused on business, politics, and the family empire. Even though her speech was well received, it was clear that Tiffany's presence was more symbolic than strategic. Unlike Ivanka, she was not being positioned as a major political figure. She wasn't taking on advisory roles or appearing at campaign rallies as frequently as her siblings. Once the election was over and Donald Trump assumed office, Tiffany faded back into the background, focusing on her legal studies at Georgetown University. Throughout her father's presidency, she remained largely removed from the political chaos that surrounded the Trump administration. While Ivanka and her husband Jared Kushner became senior advisors in the White House, Tiffany maintained a quieter existence. She continued her studies, made occasional appearances at high-profile events, and avoided getting entangled in policy discussions. For many, this was seen as a sign that she was intentionally keeping her distance. But by 2019, everything changed. Tiffany found herself at the center of an unexpected controversy, one that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with her relationship with her father. During an off-the-record conversation with reporters, Madeleine Westerhout, one of Donald Trump's closest personal assistants, allegedly made a comment that sent shockwaves through the media. She reportedly told journalists that Trump did not like to be photographed with Tiffany because of her body. The comment was not meant for public consumption, but once it was leaked, the fallout was immediate. People were stunned. The remark painted a picture of a fractured relationship between Tiffany and her father, one that had long been speculated about but never openly discussed. Westerhout was quickly dismissed from her role in the White House, but the damage had already been done. Trump attempted to do damage control by publicly denying the claim, saying, "I love Tiffany." But for many, the denial did little to erase the perception that she had been treated differently from his other children. This was not the first time Tiffany's relationship with her father had come into question, but it was the most public incident yet. It forced people to reconsider just how close she truly was to him. Unlike Ivanka, who had long been regarded as Donald Trump's favorite child, Tiffany was often seen as the outlier. Despite the controversy, Tiffany continued to maintain a level of discretion. She did not publicly address the Westerhout incident, nor did she respond to speculation about her relationship with her father. Instead, she stayed focused on finishing law school and preparing for the next chapter of her life. But by 2020, she was pulled back into the political sphere once again. Her father was up for re-election, and once again, Tiffany was expected to make public appearances in support of his campaign. However, this time, her tone had shifted. At the Republican National Convention, her speech was noticeably different from the one she had given 4 years earlier. In 2016, she had spoken about her father's personal support. In 2020, she took on a much more political stance. She spoke about media bias, censorship, and the manipulation of public opinion. She urged voters to look beyond rhetoric and judge leaders based on results. This shift did not go unnoticed. While her speech was well received by supporters of her father, it raised questions about whether Tiffany was being pushed into a more prominent role. She had spent most of her life outside the political spotlight, but now she was delivering speeches with strong political messaging. It was unclear whether this was a personal decision or a strategic move by the campaign. Some believed Tiffany was trying to solidify her place within the Trump family as the political landscape became more intense. Others speculated that she was simply fulfilling an obligation, doing what was expected of her while keeping her personal views private. Whatever the case, it was clear that she was being drawn into the political machine in a way that she had never been before. As the election cycle continued, Tiffany made more campaign appearances, attending rallies and events alongside her father. But once the election was over and Donald Trump left office in 2021, Tiffany once again stepped back from public life. Unlike Ivanka, who had been deeply involved in her father's administration, Tiffany did not take on a political advisory role. She had completed law school and seemed more focused on her own future rather than the political trajectory of the Trump family. But even as she distanced herself, questions about her relationship with her father never faded. The Westerhout controversy had left a lasting impression, and many wondered if Tiffany would ever speak out about the dynamics within the Trump family. While her siblings remained vocal and politically active, Tiffany chose a different path, one that kept her largely out of the headlines. Then, in 2024, a new chapter in Tiffany's life began. She married Michael Boulos, a billionaire heir with deep business ties in Nigeria and Lebanon. Their relationship had been largely low profile compared to other Trump marriages, but the wedding was a grand affair, held at Mar-a-Lago. While her father was present for the wedding and spoke warmly about Tiffany, observers noted that their interactions seemed formal rather than deeply affectionate. After her wedding, Tiffany and Michael continued to lead a relatively private life, avoiding the media frenzy that often surrounded the rest of the Trump family. But as 2025 approached, the political climate shifted once again. With Donald Trump positioning himself for another potential run, all eyes turned back to his children. Would Tiffany re-enter the political sphere? Or had she permanently distanced herself? Then came the Milwaukee convention. Tiffany attended the event, and while she was there to support her father, one moment stood out. As she approached him, cameras captured a brief but awkward exchange. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't an outright snub, but it was enough to reignite speculation about the state of their relationship. Had the years of distance finally created a permanent divide? Was Tiffany merely fulfilling a family duty, or was she stepping into a larger role? These questions remain unanswered, but what is clear is that Tiffany Trump has always occupied a unique position within the family. She has never been as vocal as her siblings, nor has she fully embraced the Trump brand in the same way. And now, at 31, her decision to remain selectively involved in her father's world raises even more questions about where she truly stands. Tiffany Trump had always been the quietest member of her family, and for the most part, it seemed like she wanted it that way. While the rest of the Trump children had spent years in the spotlight, whether through business, politics, or media, Tiffany had remained an outsider in many ways. But as she entered her early 30s, her position within the family and the world seemed more uncertain than ever. After her wedding to Michael Boulos, Tiffany's public presence diminished even further. Unlike Ivanka, who had stepped away from politics but remained in the public eye through business ventures and social media, Tiffany seemed content with a more private life. She had a law degree, a marriage to a billionaire heir, and the freedom to choose whether or not she wanted to be involved in her father's world. But with Donald Trump still at the center of American politics, avoiding the spotlight entirely was never going to be easy. When Trump began making moves toward another political campaign, his children were once again expected to play their roles. Don Jr. and Eric were as vocal as ever, fiercely defending their father against critics and staying involved in Republican politics. Ivanka had noticeably stepped back, choosing to focus on her family and business interests rather than returning to a political role. That left Tiffany in a familiar position, somewhere in between, neither fully involved nor completely absent. Her attendance at the Milwaukee convention was one of the first major signals that she was still willing to show support for her father in public. But it wasn't just her presence that caught attention, it was the way she interacted with Donald Trump. As she approached him, cameras captured a moment that felt different from the warm embraces he often shared with Ivanka. The greeting was polite, but it lacked the effortless familiarity that people had come to expect between a father and daughter. It wasn't the kind of moment that would spark a scandal, but for those who had followed the Trump family dynamics closely, it spoke volumes. It reinforced the idea that Tiffany's relationship with her father had always been different. Unlike her older siblings who had built their entire lives around the Trump name, Tiffany had never seemed completely comfortable in that role. For years, the assumption had been that Tiffany simply preferred a quieter life, one focused on personal goals rather than public appearances. But as she moved further into adulthood, some began to question whether her distance from the Trump brand was entirely by choice. The Westerhout controversy had already fueled speculation that Tiffany was not seen in the same light as her half-siblings. And even though her father had publicly denied any favoritism, there were clear signs that her role in the family was fundamentally different. During Trump's presidency, it became increasingly clear that Ivanka was the favored daughter in both business and politics. She had a direct advisory role in the White House. She was positioned as an ambassador of the Trump brand, and she was consistently by her father's side in both official and personal matters. Tiffany, on the other hand, was rarely seen in those same circles. Even when she made public appearances, they were usually carefully managed events like the Republican National Convention speeches or family gatherings at Mar-a-Lago. She never played a key role in policy discussions or business dealings, and when the administration faced controversy, she was nowhere near the decision-making table. Some argued that this was simply because she had been raised in a different environment. She had not grown up in New York under her father's direct influence, and she had not been immersed in the Trump organization from an early age like her siblings. Others believed it was a deliberate effort to keep her at arm's length, ensuring that she remained a family member rather than an active participant in Trump's political and business empire. But if Tiffany had been kept on the sidelines, why did she continue to appear at campaign events? Why did she choose to give politically charged speeches in 2020 when she could have just stayed out of it altogether? For some, the answer was simple: loyalty. Regardless of the distance, Tiffany was still Donald Trump's daughter, and when it came time to support him, she did what was expected. For others, it was more complicated. Some believed that Tiffany was trying to secure a stronger position within the family, especially with Ivanka stepping back from politics. But if that were the case, why hadn't she taken on a more active role after Trump left office? If she truly wanted to cement herself within the Trump brand, there had been plenty of opportunities to do so. Instead, she had continued to keep a low profile, living her life largely out of the public eye while her siblings carried the political torch. Tiffany's reluctance to step into a bigger role could be seen as a sign that she was trying to carve out a separate identity. She had spent much of her childhood and young adulthood outside of the Trump empire, and it was possible that she wanted to maintain that independence. But with her father's political ambitions still driving the family's public image, separating herself completely might not have been an option. Despite staying mostly quiet, Tiffany had shown moments where she was willing to push back against public narratives about her. One of the rare times she did so was in response to the media coverage of her law school journey. When she enrolled at Georgetown Law, some publications suggested that her decision was a way to gain more credibility within the Trump family. Others speculated that she was being positioned for a future role in politics. But Tiffany herself made it clear that this was a personal choice, not a strategic move. In a rare social media post addressing the speculation, she stated that she had always been passionate about law and public service, and that her decision had nothing to do with politics. It was one of the few instances where she openly corrected the public perception of her, reinforcing the idea that she had her own aspirations outside of the Trump name. Still, distancing herself completely was difficult. Even if she wasn't actively seeking the spotlight, she remained a figure of public interest. Her last name alone ensured that she would always be connected to her father's political and business dealings, whether she wanted to be or not. As the Trump brand continued to evolve, so did the role of its key players. Ivanka's decision to step back meant that there was a gap in the family's political front. Don Jr. and Eric were more aggressive in their political positioning, but neither had the same polished public image that Ivanka had cultivated. Some wondered if Tiffany would eventually step in to fill that void, but so far there had been little indication that she wanted to take on that responsibility. Instead, she seemed to be maintaining the same careful balance she always had, remaining present enough to show support, but distant enough to avoid becoming fully entrenched. The Milwaukee Convention moment was a reflection of that balance. She was there, standing by her father, but the brief exchange between them suggested that their relationship remained different from the close bond he shared with his other children. At 31, Tiffany Trump remains an enigma within the Trump family. She has never been outspoken about her personal views, she has never built a career around her father's influence, and she has never positioned herself as a central figure in his legacy. Yet her presence at key moments continues to raise questions. Is she slowly being pulled into a bigger role whether she wants it or not? Or is she simply fulfilling family obligations while keeping her personal aspirations private? These questions linger, and as the political climate shifts once again, Tiffany may soon be forced to decide how much of her father's world she truly wants to be a part of. Tiffany Trump's position within the family has always been a topic of quiet speculation. But as the years pass, her choices seem to speak louder than words. While her half-siblings continue to be vocal about their father's legacy, Tiffany remains in the background, making occasional appearances but never fully stepping into the spotlight. At 31, she stands at a crossroads. The question is whether she will continue to walk the fine line between loyalty and distance, or if she is ready to redefine her place within the Trump family narrative. Her decision to support her father at select campaign events such as the Milwaukee Convention suggests that she is still willing to align herself with the family's public image. But her careful avoidance of deeper political involvement signals something else entirely. Unlike her brothers, who have built their entire public identities around their father's name, Tiffany has never made political loyalty her defining characteristic. And unlike Ivanka, who seamlessly transitioned from a business figure to a political advisor, Tiffany has never played a direct role in shaping policy or strategy. That isn't to say she has not benefited from the Trump name. Despite maintaining a lower profile, Tiffany has still been granted opportunities that come with being part of one of the most powerful families in America. Her education at the University of Pennsylvania and Georgetown Law School, her access to elite social circles, and her high-profile wedding at Mar-a-Lago are all privileges tied to her last name. But privilege does not necessarily mean influence, and in Tiffany's case, her role in the Trump dynasty remains undefined. One of the most striking aspects of Tiffany's public presence is how controlled it has always been. She does not frequently engage with the media, and when she does, it is through carefully curated appearances. Even her social media accounts, which she once used more actively, have become noticeably quieter in recent years. Unlike Ivanka, who has carefully crafted a polished public persona through social media branding, or Don Jr., who regularly uses online platforms to engage with supporters and critics alike, Tiffany has taken a different approach. Her online presence is minimal, suggesting a deliberate choice to maintain privacy rather than feed into the ongoing political spectacle. This selective engagement raises questions about what she truly wants. If she were eager to become more involved in the Trump political machine, there would have been plenty of opportunities for her to do so. But aside from the convention speeches and a few key events, she has largely stayed away from the high-stakes world of politics. Instead, she appears to be prioritizing her personal life, particularly her marriage to Michael Boulos. Her relationship with Michael, an heir to a billion-dollar business empire, has further solidified her position within global elite circles. Unlike Ivanka, who married Jared Kushner, a powerful figure in both business and politics, Tiffany's marriage has kept her distanced from the political side of the Trump family. While Jared played a pivotal role in the Trump administration, Michael has remained outside of U.S. political affairs, focusing instead on international business. This contrast is important because it highlights the fundamental difference in how Tiffany and Ivanka have approached their lives under the Trump name. Ivanka has always been deeply embedded in the brand, shaping her image around her father's influence. Tiffany, on the other hand, has taken a more reserved path, even as she remains connected to the family. That doesn't mean she has completely avoided controversy. Over the years, she has been pulled into the Trump family's public battles, sometimes willingly and sometimes not. The Westerhout controversy in 2019 was a rare moment where she became an unexpected focal point in the discussion about Trump's family dynamics. But even then, she chose not to comment publicly, allowing others to speculate about her father's true feelings. More recently, Tiffany's appearances at political events have sparked renewed speculation about her role. While she has never taken a direct political stance beyond supporting her father, her presence at key campaign moments suggests that she is still considered a valuable asset within the family's public image. Whether this is a personal choice or simply a matter of obligation remains unclear. As 2025 unfolds, Tiffany's decisions will likely become more telling. With her father's political future uncertain and her siblings taking different paths, she may soon have to define her own. Will she choose to step away entirely, embracing a private life away from the Trump legacy? Or will she continue to walk the tightrope, maintaining her connections without fully immersing herself in the family's political and business affairs? For now, she remains an enigma, present but distant, loyal but independent. Tiffany Trump's story has always been one of quiet complexity, and as she moves further into adulthood, that complexity only deepens. At 31, she is still figuring out where she belongs in a family that has built itself around power, influence, and unwavering loyalty. And in a world where every move the Trump family makes is scrutinized, that may be the most strategic position of all. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come this far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.